Hello, everyone, to what's going to be the first Making Great Dungeons and Dragons. I am Paco Garcia.
And I am Chris Sims.
As you can see, if you look at the screen right now, because there is a streaming of Chris on screen right now. There is. So you cannot miss us. I mean, I know that we look like, separated at birth kind of persons, but that's how we are. We cannot
My
help
facial
it.
hair isn't good enough. My facial hair isn't good enough.
So, okay, welcome to Making Great. This is a show that Chris and I thought about like a year ago.
I don't remember, man.
Yeah,
maybe.
A long time ago. And we did a prep session, and then life became very complicated. But here we are. And I think this is the first episode, so we don't have any guests. But we hope we're going to have some absolutely incredible people coming to help us find out what makes great for the first season Dungeons and Dragons. And I think it's quite propitious that we're doing this episode today on the 21st of August 2022, the week where Wizards of the Coast has announced that they're reviewing 5th edition to create, but to improve it, hopefully. And they're doing some sort of, like they did with 5e, a survey and a playtest where they are trying to involve as many people as possible. So they have already released the first tiny little bit, which I've taken a quick look at. I haven't read in depth, and it is all to do with character origins. Chris, have you read the whole thing?
I have not read the whole thing. I have read big chunks of it. And I would say that Wizards has been previewing their review of D&D in some recent publications like Monsters of the Multiverse and
Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. They did an awful lot
there. The Radiant Citadel.
Even
all of that stuff.
Even in Spelljammer, it seems that they have redone an awful lot of the stuff. And I haven't got Spelljammer yet because I live in this country. I am not going to get it until the middle of next month. So I am like, right now about that, which is annoying. But
Paco, you would already have it if you use D&D Beyond.
I would, but that means having to use digital reading, which is not something I am very keen on because I have it hard to read on screens. It's something that, firstly, to be perfectly honest, I don't particularly like it. And secondly, it just makes it a lot harder for me with my dyslexia and my neurodiversity. So I try not to do it. But I've made the effort of going through the character origins a little bit. And there are some wowza bits in there. And I can see they're making a lot of effort. A lot. But
what do you mean by wowza, Paco?
Well, okay, unnecessary restrictions and unnecessary words in what it is race, ancestry. I miss the word species all over the place. So it's basically the character origin that I'm a bit. Why are you so overcomplicating this?
What's overcomplicated? What do you think is overcomplicated?
Okay, firstly, I think they need to define, if not the how, because that is probably quite obvious, the why you can have a half-elf or a half-orc or a half-orc gnome now, etc., etc. If they keep using the word race, then that means that I presume biologically there is some sort of compatibility between them, and that's why they can mix and procreate, which would make sense. However, if it isn't, if they are different species with different, for lack of a better word, genome, because I'm not one to enforce reality into a magical world, but I don't have another word to describe it. So let's say that they are genetically incompatible or whateverly incompatible. Then how do these mixes happen? And if that is the case, why would half orcs and half elves with humans be more common? Why would the other things be wondrous, as they have been described? The other mixes, why would they be wondrous?
Well, this is going to allow me to segue into something that is, how do you make something, one thing that helps you make something great, and this isn't just Dungeons and Dragons, but I think it applies to any game, and that is leave the right gaps and fill the right gaps.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when you leave a gap open, people fill it with, for lack of a better term, real world BS or overly pedantic, science oriented malarkey, whatever. And other times when you leave a gap, people fill it with fun.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be, when you're designing something, you just have to be discerning enough to know which is which. I think that what you're keying in on is that there's a gap here that should be filled and isn't.
Or completely left out. To be
Right.
honest, personally, I think if you just say that any humanoid race can procreate with any humanoid race, that's it. I don't think you need to say anything else. There's no reason why an orc can't fall in love with a gnome or with a halfling.
Oh, I don't think in this type of world, I don't think you even need to say that. You could just say, because of the nature of the multiverse and the magic in it, these mixing of species is possible, whether it's biological or not.
That's it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and this is something that WotC has been criticized for in the past quite a lot. It's not just a matter of what they do, but how they express it. So I'm just reading. If you'd like to play the child of such a wondrous pairing, choose 2 race options. Why wondrous? Why can't it just be standard? Why can't it just be, it is what happens. It doesn't need to be wondrous. Come on, if that is the case, then 2 humans having a child should also be wondrous. Birth is a wondrous thing. So is that it creates a separation that it doesn't resonate with me. I don't feel it is necessary to have that. And I know that I'm being very picky. I just don't feel it is necessary to have it.
Well, would it be better if they mentioned magic somewhere else?
No, I just think, if you simply said this sentence with, if you'd like to play a child of such pairing, done.
Okay.
Done. That's it. It doesn't need to be wondrous. That's it. It's done. But I think they need to be specific. Like, for instance, they also say, folk who have a human parent and an orc or an elf parent are particularly common. Where? What happens in a world where there are fewer orcs or there aren't really humans?
Well, one has to assume that they're talking about the Dungeons and Dragons multiverse.
Yeah, but even in the Dungeons and Dragons multiverse, there are worlds where there aren't that many. And in athas, there aren't that many orcs.
But in almost every other D&D world, there are.
I know, but what I'm trying to say is that I don't think there is any benefit in quantifying, in telling people, kind of backhandedly guiding them into this is more common. This is more, no, doesn't matter. It can be done. It can be done anywhere. That's it, done. It doesn't, leave it to the setting. In each setting, tell me which one is more common because the demographics kind of propitiate that. And then I'm okay with it. Maybe,
So
in sorry.
If they had said, for example, in some settings, folk who have a human parent and an orc parent are particularly common.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, I am being very picky, but people are being very picky with this because they want it to be absolutely right, and I'm getting it. So,
I mean, to me, that I think that you're right that if we're talking about making something great, that type of writing needs to be punched in a certain direction to be explicit in a way that tells you what it really means fully.
Mm-hmm. Leave as little room for interpretation as possible. And whatever room for interpretation there is, make sure that that is specified. And by the way, even though I'm being very picky, I don't want to come across as if I am being hostile to what's been written. I understand that this is a pre-beta version of everything. I don't know how many revisions this has gone through. I'd be surprised if many. So I think this is the proper time to be properly critical of this and offering.
I think since the playtesting is going to go through 2023 and the game isn't going to be released probably until, I would bet, August of 2024, then, and having been involved in this process before, there's going to be a lot of revision.
But up to today, I mean, I'd be surprised if they spent an awful lot of time reviewing this. It wouldn't make sense. So that's one thing. The other thing that I found a bit, I'm not liking this either. It says, choose 2 race options that are humanoid to represent your parents. Okay, now you're telling me that my parents could be a centaur. Fine. Don't like it, but fine. Okay. Then determine which of those race options provide your game traits. Why? Okay, imagine this. An orc and an elf love each other very much, and they have a half orc elf. And that half orc elf falls in love and loves very, very much a genasi. And they have a little baby who goes on to absolutely love him very, very much, this incredible tiefling. And they also have a baby. So which one of those do I choose? And why can that baby have, an orc trait? Because it's come down through the ancestry. Why can't I have the bulking body of an orc? Because my great-great-granddad was that. And it would be so freaking cool.
So, yeah, see, I think you're hitting on something. So if we're talking about making great again, I think that this particular rule is not going to give people what they want. And what people want when they choose to be half elf, for example, is a little bit human and a little bit elf. Or if you're half orc and half dwarf, I want this from the dwarf, and I want this from the orc, and I want to smash them together. And this rule, I think that what you're feeling, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's not giving you that smashing together part that is what people want from this type of mixing. I want to be able to take this dwarf trait and this orc trait and mix them together and have this character that does that. And maybe it's because I'm min-maxing. I'm not concerned about why.
To be honest,
but that's what, yeah, so that's what people want from this type of thing, and this is not going to give it to them. That's the real problem. If we're talking about making great, then to make great, you look at what you think your audience needs and wants, and you try to give that to them. Now, the problem here is that they're trying to keep it simple, and the two are in conflict. And that's often the case in design. The two are often in conflict. So if you have a new player, and a new player wants to play certain things, and maybe they do want to play part one thing and part another thing, choosing it this way is super simple. But I doubt it's even satisfying to the new person who wants to play the game.
To me, it doesn't feel like it. But also, I think it is in very much in contrast.
Hey, well, that's just sorry to interrupt you, but that's another thing about making great is that the form follows the feeling, the function that and the feeling that you want the player to have, right? You create something to evoke what you want players to feel, or what you want them to do in the game or accomplish in the game, and it's supposed to evoke a certain either mode of play or feeling or both. And if it doesn't do that, then that rule isn't doing its job, right? That feature isn't doing its job.
Exactly. So that's why I'm a bit about that. But also, I think it goes very much against the other rule that they've implemented of giving you a number of modifiers and then apply them however you want.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit. So wait a second. So if I have to choose one of the two, where then you're telling me where I have to apply those modifiers. You know, if I'm going to choose the orc, then you're telling me that I need to put those modifiers more towards strength or towards constitution or toward charisma. What if I don't want to do that? And what if I have somebody who is so diverse in their ancestry that it could be anything, anything at all? And you know what? If people are mix maxing, I don't care. If they're going to have fun with that, whatever.
So let me propose something. There's a way that you could do this that I think we're going to see a book soon that's not from Wizards that does this. But anyway, there's a way you could do this that, and they've done it in the background section here. There's a way you could do this that would let people have what they want from this type of rule, and you could still have pre-packaged ancestries.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you show people how to build an ancestry. Now you show people how to build an ancestry, and if you're constructing this book for beginners and advanced players, what you do is say, if you're a beginner, skip this part
Mm-hmm.
and go to the pre-packaged ancestry. That's where you find the elf, the orc, the halfling. But if you're an advanced player and you want to build your own, this is how you do it. And then once you teach somebody how to do that, you don't have to have a rule like that.
Exactly.
You can there are weighted choices that somebody, I mean, Pathfinder 2 does this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have Ancestry Feats. And if you're going to be multiple ancestries, how you display that in the game is you choose feats from multiple ancestries. So basically they're teaching you how to build an ancestry in that game.
And I like that. I like that. I like that idea, you know, that you can actually guide people from beginning to end on how to get started. Which,
I mean, this is as old as Shadowrun, for example, the Shadowrun game that came out in the 80s. You could build your own character, right, with that game,
mm-hmm.
but there was page after page after page after page in that book of cool, pre-made archetypal characters. You could just pick one up and play it.
And you know, considering how much Wizards of the Coast is going to rely on D&D Beyond, there's absolutely zero reason why not to make downloadable aids for people who want to take a look at ready-made ancestries.
Yeah, and that stuff is perfect for like a starter set.
Even campaign settings. You know, you tell me in the Player's Handbook or the GM's book, you tell me how to build ancestries. You know, start gently and then give me a few lessons. Don't just throw me into the, you know, deep end, but give me a little bit. And then in the Dragonlance, give me a number of ancestries and then a few guidelines as to how to adapt the Player's Handbook to Dragonlance or to Planescape or to Ravenloft. Because they don't, I think that would allow a greater level of customization for each setting. You know, you don't need to be able to create the same ancestries in Dragonlance that you can in Ravenloft. You know, maybe you want to create ancestries with Dragonfolk in Dragonlance that maybe you don't have, or Lizardfolk, because you don't have Lizardfolk in Ravenloft, or Athas, or Sigil.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to do something similar. So I think that will give them a little bit more that level of flexibility to enhance the campaign settings as they see fit, or create new modules or new books.
Yeah, I think that, to reiterate though, I think that in this particular case, they're trying to keep it simple, and it's not great yet. They're going to have to push this a little further. They're going to have to push this further.
I think so. There are a couple of, mechanically speaking, there are a couple of things that I am also a little bit nonplussed about. One, don't take away critical hits for NPCs.
Why not, Paco?
Because I think it will, having the chance of a goblin doing so much damage because they've actually found the slit of the armpit of your armor and stick their dagger in there, makes combat so much more exciting and so much more lethal. I like that. Otherwise, it's a bit like, oh, it's just a bunch of goblins. None of them is ever going to make more than X amount of damage. So why bother?
Well, let me give you a proposal here. And this is what I predict they're doing. So, and we can come back to this video later and say, oh, Chris was totally wrong or Chris was totally right. But so player characters are subject to a tremendous number more rolls than a monster ever is, because monsters don't live long enough. If you're in a combat encounter, the monsters don't live long enough to see that type of thing. So one of the problems with giving NPCs critical hits is that it's a big swing in the combat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that can be exciting. Everybody goes, oh, he took how much damage? What? But so I don't necessarily have a problem with NPCs having critical hits, but I think that the philosophy is that there's so much higher chance of there being even multiple critical hits on the NPC side in a combat that could be a big swing, a big unpredictable swing in the outcome of the combat. But secondarily, you can design monsters, and I think that they're doing this in some ways already. You can design monsters, and this is a great thing. This is a Making D&D great thing, by the way. You can design monsters in such a way that they have that spike, that critical-like spike, without it being out of the control of the Dungeon Master. In other words, it's not because the Dungeon Master rolled a 20. It's because the Dungeon Master chose that rechargeable action that round.
Okay.
And the monster is purposefully designed that way so the spike is predictable and under the control of the DM. So, for example, if you want the goblin that shanks you in the gap in your armor, he could literally have an ability that says shank, and it's a big damage spike, right?
Okay, but I reckon though that would make the life of the GM a little bit harder, because that means that you need to, firstly, that you would be able to give different skills to different NPCs. And if you're trying to control, I don't know, say 12 goblins, then having to think about, well, these 7 goblins cannot do much, but these other 3 goblins can do so and so, and this one can do so and so, and this one can do so and so different. I think that could complicate things. So I'm going to propose something different that I think was great, and I loved it. Bring back the minions from 4th edition. So out of those 12 goblins, however many are going to be minions, and they don't have the ability of doing a critical hit, and the other ones do. The players don't need to know which ones they are. So they don't know when they're fighting with any of them who is going to be a minion or who is going to be a level 1. So
yeah, I think that those two things can go together though. So you have these non-minion, the basic goblin doesn't have the shank ability, right? He doesn't have the stab you in your armor. The goblin stabber does, right? And that goblin is tougher. The normal goblin is basically a minion. So I think you're right. I think that many of the monsters that you're going to run in the game aren't going to have some of these damage spikes, but the ones that are meant to be more interesting and for the players to remember the experience of encountering them will.
Yeah, there is also something else. I mean, I agree with you, but and there is something else, and is that I wonder what the experience for the GM is going to be if they can never crit.
I don't know. I think that as a DM, I'm often ambivalent, and I've seen ambivalence in other DMs on critting, because sometimes you crit and you know it's just going to be an exciting moment, and it's not gonna be a big deal, right? It's just going to be, I took how much damage? Oh my god! Like, and then people will go on and they'll remember that guy that stabbed them for 48 points of damage. But other cases, you roll a critical and it's already going against the players, and it's like, but I mean, maybe that's just me. I've seen other DMs do it though, like, or like they'll roll a crit and they'll be like, ooh. I've actually, and this is funny because both times were 4th edition. The game where player characters can't die, right?
Mm-hmm, pretty much.
I rolled a critical on a character, and in both instances, that character was killed instantly.
Okay, that's really heavy.
So
that's a little bit heavy. Yeah, I mean, I can see the pros and cons, and I think I don't know how to reach a middle point, because I mean we've been talking about minions and goblins and whatever, but I cannot imagine I don't know, a paladin of death, a challenge rating 4, challenge rating 8 foe not being able to crit.
Well, you could give some monsters the ability to crit.
That's the thing, that I reckon they taking it away completely.
Well, it's a game of exceptions. So what they're saying is that specific trumps general. So the general rule is NPCs don't crit. But if a monster stat block says this NPC does crit, that trumps the general rule. So you could make a monster that crits.
I hope so. I hope that they, I hope that they don't take it away completely. I like the idea of the exception. I like the idea of having a number of the, in the swarm that can do. I love the idea, for example, if there is a swarm, that if the swarm is large enough, then it can crit, and if it's not large enough, then it cannot crit because of the nature of a beehive can't. But if there is a demonic beehives, then they could. I can see that I would be okay with. And the other thing that I'm thinking about, I still don't know how I feel about it, is with the automatic success on a skilled roll on a 20.
Well, I think that there's some language missing in that statement. This is my opinion, of course. But I think that the 20 should only automatically succeed if it was possible for you to succeed at all. In other words, if the DC is 30, and you have a +5 bonus and you roll a 20, that's not an automatic success. Now, again, they're trying to keep it simple and just say a 20 is a success. But in some cases, maybe they should give the DM an out by writing it so that you just tell the DM, if you know the character can't succeed by rolling a 20, tell the player this is not possible for them to accomplish, and don't let them roll at all. It's impossible, right? But then again, heroes try impossible things and fail all the time. So maybe.
But also heroes try impossible things and they succeed at times. So I wonder how the balance could be obtained. I like what you said regarding, if you wouldn't be able to do it even on a 20, then for goodness sake, don't. But then on the other hand, I do like the idea of Bilbo getting the ring from Smaug, which were overwhelmingly antagonistic odds. how do you combine those two things mechanically?
You mean the Arkenstone from Smaug?
Uh,
Or the ring from Gollum?
the ring from, of course, he got the ring from Gollum, the Artisan. I beg your pardon. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I was trying to remember the. I was watching in my head the movie sequence, and I got the Artisan. Sorry.
Yes, that was pedantic Lord of the Rings nerdery. Sorry.
No. That's absolutely. If you don't tell me, somebody else will. So I'd rather take it from you, who are my friend, and not some person. So yeah. Anyway, Bilbo shouldn't have been able to get that. Because, it's Smaug, and it would be impossible to even move through all that amount of gold without making enough noise to wake up the dragon. Hello? And yet he did. So how mechanically, how can you reflect that without being completely stupid?
What do you mean by being stupid?
As in being something that would look stupid. Level 1 character that rolls a 20 against sneaking through an ancient red dragon lair and gets the golden egg. Oh, what? It would be a bit too fantastic for me, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to equate written fiction and game fiction in some cases. Like, I would say that for example, in the campaign, if we imagine that it's a campaign that Bilbo's in, and Bilbo's player is alone in the Dragon Den looking for the Arkenstone, that he found the Arkenstone by DM fiat. The DM wanted him to find the Arkenstone, right? And also Mr. Tolkien wanted Bilbo to find the Arkenstone. Yes. So I think that would have a lot less to do with roles and a lot more to do with even the rule of cool in games, right? That you're looking for the Arkenstone. I want you to find the Arkenstone. Damn it, you're going to find the Arkenstone. But on the flip side, if you're just gaming it out, I mean, I think it goes back to what I said before. I think there's space in the game for saying you can either if you know that if they roll a 20, they will not succeed. They would not meet the DC, right? They would not meet the target number. Then you can tell them beforehand that it's impossible for them, or you can let them roll, and even if they roll a 20, they will fail. So that rule, I think that rule, again, they're trying to keep it simple, but I think that rule has room in it for I mean, there are other games that do that, right? That you roll a high number, you automatically succeed unless you would have still failed. So there's room for that.
I think it needs some sort of yes and or yes but sort of rule added to it. Okay, you wouldn't be able to get it, but you roll a 20, you manage, but something else happens. And I get what you're saying regarding the pivotal moment. This has to happen, but that has more to do with the design of the adventure or the campaign than it is to do with the mechanics of the thing. I'm talking, for instance, it has to happen that Bilbo found the Arkenstone, but it didn't. It doesn't have to happen that he goes to, I don't know, Rivendell and gets into a fisticuffs friendly banter with one of the elves and manages to knock him off with a punch in the nose, which would be a bit like, you've never fought before, you've never done this. I mean, it could be impossible, but you want to be able to have a way of playing that and make it mechanical for the people who want to play that mechanically rather than to role play, which is probably what I would do. So I think that needs tweaking. I think that simplicity is a bit too simple for me.
Yeah, and it hasn't become great yet.
No. I certainly don't think so. So I don't know. Those are the things that I found thus far that I have found a bit underwhelming. Things that I have liked a lot. humans can now be small or medium size. Love that.
I think that is fitting for other ancestries too. For example, humans can be small and medium, but dwarves can only be medium.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's room for small dwarves
and small genasi and small elves,
and small elves. Why not? I think that as long as you're within the expected size of the game, barring more advanced rules for making characters that are kind of outside the norm, that whether you're small or medium is hardly relevant.
Absolutely, but I don't know. I guess I like the idea of an elf and a dwarf that love each other very much, or an elf and a gnome who love each other
that's
very
what
much,
I'm saying.
and they can get a tiny little mini elf. That's the 2 feet tall mini elf. That would be lovely and cute.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that all of these ancestries should just be, as long as you're medium and small, your size, like medium or small is what I meant to say. I think that all of these ancestries could have that, besides maybe the halfling. Like maybe a race that's small is
small.
always small.
Yeah, no,
it's small.
That would make sense.
I mean, and maybe you pick for aesthetic reasons, and brand reasons, which is valid. You pick a couple that no, you're medium. There are no tinier people in this ancestry, but I don't see how that's really. I mean, that would be the reason that they would do it. That would be the reason that they would not put, for example, that you can be a small elf. The reason that they would do it is for brand and Dungeons and Dragons aesthetic reasons.
But the thing is, to be honest, I think that's fair enough. I like the idea that a halfling, if your dad is a halfling, your mom is a halfling, and it's been so for generations, then you are tiny, you're little. Fine, fair enough, that's cool. But if your dad is a halfling and your mom is an elf, I like the idea of having an elf side halfling. Why not get the appearance of it? You still have a half elf, but your appearance is that of a halfling. Why not?
So what you're saying is that you have a 5 to 6 foot tall halfling.
Yeah. But it's not. It's
it's
a half halfling. It's a halfling or half elf. Halfling. Or half elf.
Half elfling.
Yeah. Because they have mixed ancestry.
Well, the funny thing is that with the rules that are written in this document, that's exactly what would happen. So if you were half elf and half halfling, but you chose elf traits, just by the rules as written in this playtest document, you chose elf traits, you would be 5 to 6 feet tall.
I'm not sure that's exactly it, because it does.
Or does it say you mix the size?
Well, you say determine which of those two race options provides you game traits: size, speed,
speed.
But you have to choose which ones it come from.
Yeah.
You can then mix and match visual characteristics, color, ear shape, and the like, or the two options. So the example it gives, for example, if your character has a halfling and an own parent, you might choose halfling for your game traits and then decide that your character has the pointed ears that are characteristic of a gnome. It doesn't mention body size because you're talking halfling and
but it does mention size up here.
It does, yeah. So yeah, I suppose you could do that.
So if I'm a half elfling, I could be medium.
I can have a gnome size orc.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. That has to be so cute. That has to be amazing. That has to be absolutely amazing. Or imagine a gnome the size of an orc. It would be like having Hulk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boom. That's great.
The thing is, you would choose, as what we were talking about, the rules is written here. You would be a gnome and an orc, and you would choose orc if you wanted to be the big hulking gnome, and you would choose gnome if you wanted to be the tiny orc.
Yeah.
And then you would just describe yourself as a tiny orc. Well, I'm using game sizes, so I should say small orc.
Yeah.
Small.
Yeah, because tiny would be about this size.
Tiny is tiny. Tiny is tinier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, and now for you, because obviously you are the one of the two with the I'm the opinionated one and you are the knowledgeable one. So as a designer, as a designer, what would you like to see in the rules that would make Dungeons and Dragons, the next iteration, whatever they call it, great?
Well, let's talk about what's in this document. One thing I think that they should do is stop fiddling around with where ability score modifiers are and just put all of those rules in ability scores. So, right now they've tried to attach ability score modifiers to how you build your background, and in the sample backgrounds, they give you choices for your ability score increases.
Mm-hmm.
But since you can build your background, they're essentially saying you can put these increases anywhere you want. So really, they should just stop trying to attach it to any other game element and put it in the ability score rules and be done with it. That's my opinion. So excise it from backgrounds, keep it out of Ancestry,
mm-hmm.
and just put it in the ability score rules.
I don't dislike that because the reason I prefer what you're saying is because, for example, I'm looking here at the cultist, and it gives ability +2 intelligence, +1 charisma. Why do all cultists have to be super clever and super charismatic? What if they're a cultist of an absolutely horrific demon and they actually are anti-charismatic?
So this is an example of what we were talking about before, where they've taught you how to build something, right?
Mm-hmm.
First section, and that's great. Like they teach you how to build it. And then they gave you a bunch of samples, which are just archetypes that if you were trying to keep it simple and you just wanted to pick something and be done with it, that's what you would do, right? So I don't have a bad feeling about these example backgrounds just because that's all they are. They're examples. And literally you could say, I'm going to take the acolyte, but because I'm a war priest, I'm going to get +2 to strength and +1 to wisdom. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, since you can build your entire background anyway, how could your DM say no to that, right? I mean, these samples are not meant to be rules. They're not meant to be rules in the sense that you have to follow this, because obviously you could use the acolyte, just as I said, for an example, but say, I'm a war acolyte, so I'm calligrapher supplies, armorer's tools, right? So yeah, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I said if I like the fact that you can build your background, and I like the fact that you can choose an archetype. You can basically just choose one of these packages and be done with it. Mm-hmm. A more advanced player isn't going to do that ever, but it's okay if unless something just happens to be perfect, right, for the concept that the player has. But that's why I'm saying that this ability score being chucked in here with this other stuff, it doesn't, since you could change it altogether, it being in background doesn't make any sense at all. It should just be in ability scores. Now you can even say in the ability score rules, when you're choosing your ability score increases, you might want to consider your class and background, right?
Mm-hmm. You
can say that in the ability score rules. It shouldn't be down here in the background rules, is all I'm saying. Because every advanced player is going to choose those increases based on what they need to build the character that they want. They're not going to use it. They're not going to use these sample backgrounds. And if the background that they want doesn't match what they need, they're going to change every aspect of the background that doesn't match.
I wonder if there's a way to actually, I'm not going to say merge, but a formula to be able to combine the background with the class or subclass. As you said, I want to have a background of an acolyte, but my character is a fighter. So I want to have those ability scores driven by the fact that I'm a weaponsmith. I'm good at fighting, not necessarily at thinking. So I wonder if do you think that there could be a way to mix those things so your class is what helps you determine what your ability score modifiers are going to be?
No, I don't think it belongs there either. I think that if you're going to, I mean, it could go there, but and people have experimented with that in third-party products. But I just think that if you're going to have this type of very open and I think good rule where you can just assign these ability score increases as you wish, just belongs in the ability score rules. So
okay, no, that's fair enough. I think that would actually it would probably simplify. It might make it a little bit more complex at the beginning to where do you want to assign, because you need to have clearer the kind of character that you want to create for yourself. But the rest of the character creation process will probably be a lot easier if it was done that way. There is
one reason to have it in a class, though, is for a beginning player that tells them what ability score they need to focus on, right? So that is an argument for having it in class. That is not an argument for having it in backgrounds.
No, I don't
So
think. I just don't think that the backgrounds. I think background need to be a little bit more generic than that. You know, Artisan. Why Artisan is given here +2 intelligence +1 charisma. Why can't an artisan have it on dexterity, because they're so used to using their hands?
Yeah.
Why charisma? You know, I know plenty of artisans who are completely horrible people and really unpleasant. That doesn't make them bad at their job. It's just that they are not particularly good at people. Why does it have to be in charisma? Why is there investigation and persuasion for an artisan? What?
Well, I mean,
what kind of artisan are we talking about here? You know,
we're obviously talking about one that's incisive and has the gift of gab, which is not all artisans either. But well, I mean, and the language is Gnomish, which is also a little weird. But I mean, but they're samples, right? They're intended to be, you know, this is something that somebody built for their specific character. Really, a sample means that I'm a cleric who chose this who built this acolyte background, and I have +2 to wisdom and +1 to intelligence because that's what I wanted, right?
But that's why I think, and that's why I think also perhaps the backgrounds should go in the campaign settings. I mean, yes, have a few in the player handbook, because you need to have a little bit of everything. But I think they need to be either more specific, you know, like a potter artisan is not going to need the same ability modifiers than a jeweler. They're just not, or a armor maker. They're just not. They're completely different things. So I think they need to be a little bit more specific, or leave the backgrounds to reflect the world that the players are going to be playing in, or the professions available where the players are going to be playing in.
Yeah, I think that these samples exist in the same space that we were talking about before, where I said the Shadowrun games archetypes exist. And that is, you look at them and they're good examples of what you could do, and they're easy to just pick up and play with if that's what you want to do. They kind of are a secondary teaching tool as well, because you look at these things as examples. Of course, they're literal examples. So then you can go back and build your own. But so I don't think that they're saying, if you look at them as if they were rules elements that cannot be altered, which is not true because you can build your own background. then yeah, they would be a bit restrictive and a bit narrow. But as samples, they're fine. I mean,
I just hope for me, the reason to keep pointing at it is because I rather that they realize that their case is that samples, but as a proper tool of a finished game, I don't think that would be great.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
That they should. I hope that they're not going to keep them the way they are. That these are samples, fine, for a pre-beta version of the game. Okay, we can play with it just to see how it feels. But I don't think if they left these archetypes just like they are in the player's handbook, the final product, I don't think that would be a good idea.
And why not?
Because they're not. How to put this? I don't feel they're flexible enough. I'm thinking from the point of view of somebody who wants to follow the rules. I know they're samples, but I reckon they could be more hard work. Give me an artisan, but give me a specific artisan if you're going to give me a sample.
Well, I mean, that would be a cool thing to do. That would be great if we had acolyte of a war cult, acolyte of a cloister of knowledge, potter, armorer, confidence person, cultist, demonic cultist.
Correct.
Right. That type of thing. Yeah.
That's the thing. Be more specific.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think they would be better that way. And I'll just reiterate that the ability score shouldn't be there at all.
No, I agree. Again, unless you're going to be very specific, okay, but I think that would be more driven by the class if necessary. Artisan or occultist of what? An artisan of war. Again, you're very used to making armors or forging your own sword, and you've become very good at it. You're an artisan, but this is what's driving your ability scores because this is what you're used to doing. If
you're a blacksmith, so you get +2 to strength and +1 to intelligence or whatever.
So, yeah, something like that, or wisdom because you remember how the techniques are going to go, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I think that would work. Or simply just say, you have a +3 modifier to use between two different abilities. So one of them is going to get a +2, whichever you want. Just justify it. It's your character. Do whatever you want with it, and the other one's going to get a +1. Finished.
Yeah, I mean that's what the ability scores thing in build your own background says. When you determine your character's ability scores, choose 2 of them, increase one by 2 and the other by 1. Alternatively, choose 3 and increase each of them by 1.
That's it.
Yeah.
Done. But then take it away from the sample. As you say.
Yeah.
It means nothing to me there. Good. Okay, so we're in agreement. Yeah, we're making this great. I love it. And we've been going for nearly an hour. So let's start wrapping it up. Now, we've talked about this from the rules and the character creation point of view sort of thing, but for you as a pretty much all your life player and designer, what would you want to see in the next iteration of Dungeons and Dragons that would make the game really great?
I think that the monsters need a little bit of re-engineering so that they do the things that they're supposed to do. One of the complaints in the community, for example, and I mean, I've seen this in my play too, it doesn't really bother me because I can handle it, but is that the monsters don't live up to their claimed challenge, right? So if a monster has a challenge of 14, a party of 9th level characters can beat it, like pretty handily, actually, in some cases. So I think that the monsters need to be retooled so they perform in a way that's a little more dynamic and a little more exciting. And I think that that means harkening a little bit back to 4E.
Mhm.
So we talked earlier in the show about minions,
Mhm.
but I think that there's space for monsters that function. It's one monster, but it functions as if it were several. And right now, monsters with legendary actions and stuff like that in Dungeons and Dragons don't do that adequately. And one reason they don't do that adequately is because when you give a monster legendary actions, when you're calculating its challenge rating, any damage that's in those legendary actions has to be considered as part of that challenge rating, which means that the damage often has to be dialed down
Mhm.
because this creature's getting so many actions. So what needs to happen is that an engineering of this monster is is literally functioning like as if it were two monsters. And we're also dialing it up a little bit because if it's functioning as if it were two monsters, it's functioning as if it were two monsters, but it's not. It's only one target. That's an advantage for the players. So it gets a little bump up because it's two monsters crammed into one.
Mhm.
So in 4E, that was an elite monster, and then you have a solo monster which functions basically as four monsters, or even five monsters on the battlefield. And uh, I think done well, um, that could be great.
Okay. I mean, and as far as I'm concerned, anything that's to do with improving how monsters work, especially high level monsters, I'm definitely down for that.
Yeah. I think that they're going in the right direction with a lot of things they're doing with monsters because they're putting a lot of the damage dealing abilities. They're taking them out of, like, for example, spells and putting them in literal abilities that are in the character in the monster stat block. So uh, that way, it's easy to calculate the challenge based on what that says, and not try to predict how many times this Baylor is going to cast Fireball, right? And then and uh, so there's definitely already positive movement in the direction of usability of monsters. Monsters of the Multiverse is showing that type of tech off. So I'm pretty happy with that. So
Good.
I'm optimistic that monsters are going to be tweaked in positive ways.
Sounds good. There are a couple of things that I would like to see that for me would make the game really, really great. One is the organization of the books to be done in a way that would make easy to find anything that you want very quickly. I get bored with people having to go through the book and not being able to find easily, having to go to the index, find the keyword, go back and find exactly what it is that I need to clarify. So anything that would make the clarification of the rules, firstly, the rules easier to assimilate, and secondly, finding the rules easier without having to rely on digital. Important. I think that would be great. That would be absolutely fantastic. And the other thing that I think for me would make the game great, and this is probably more to do with adventure design than the game itself, is for low-level characters to be able to face high-level enemies and not get slaughtered just like that. To be able to introduce in the adventures and the worlds themselves means that characters can actually make a mistake and wander into an area of the forest that is harder, because otherwise you have an adventure that is for characters level 1 to 4, and you pretty much know what you're going to find in that adventure. There's no way to find an ancient red dragon or Vecna within it, and I would like something to tweak that.
Well, that's where another place that monster design can come in. So in fourth edition, what you could do, and what I did do in some of my games when I was playing fourth edition, was you had what was a normal monster at challenge 14, right? That monster will just stomp, third level characters. But if you dial it down to, if you take 5 levels off of it, 5 challenge ratings off of it, and make it elite, so now it's not, now its challenge is 9, and you take a few more levels off of it and make it solo. So then it's like this big bad guy. One of the reasons he's so big and bad because is that he attacks 4 times for every one that you do, right? But he's not doing so much damage that he's just annihilating you immediately. One of the things that's harder to do about with that in the way 5th edition is designed is that some of the spells, for example, or spell-like abilities function in such a way that they can't be dialed that way. But because they're starting to put those type of abilities as actual, I mean, this, instead of them being spells, they're defined abilities in the monsters. That's an opportunity for you to be able to dial things different directions.
I think so. And also, I reckon if they make an effort in, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not going to say humanizing, but making monsters a bit more sentient. I feel that monsters have been traditionally very much, that's a target for you to kill, that's it. You know, there's few places where they say try to reason with the ogre, you know, try to talk to the troll, try to ask the hag, what do you have to do for her before, you know, so they won't kill you. I think if they make a little bit more of an emphasis that these are not mindless, stupid monsters, these are actually people that you can try and negotiate, talk to. You may still end up fighting with them if you want to. Up to you. But I don't see why, you know, a 40th level red dragon would even bother to kill a level 1 party. You know, you're not a threat. You're probably never going to be a threat because something's going to kill you by the time before you get to the point of being a threat to me. Why am I going to, you know, waste one of my burps to kill you all? Instead, I'm going to have you running errands for me. No, I think if they made an emphasis on that side of, you know, role playing within the game, I think that could make absolutely a great adventure and great opportunities.
Yeah, I think that they need to support the non-combat pillars of play more, and make it clear, not clear, an explicit part of the rules that you don't have to kill a monster. You don't even have to fight it to gain the experience in the adventure. You just have to accomplish whatever goal is related to that creature that you have, right? So going to question the hag and risking her throwing you in her pot or whatever, but getting out of there without fighting her, but getting out of there with the answer to the question that you had, you get the XP, right? That you just get the XP. You know, that your quest was not to kill the hag. Your quest was to get a piece of information she had. Now, there's a real danger there because she does really want to eat you. But you were so polite and so pretty that she just couldn't bring herself to harm you. So you can go.
Yeah. Or you promised her to bring her something else that would be even more satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whatever.
No, whatever. You know, but I think if they gave, if fighting was some sort of, like you were mentioning earlier regarding that, now that has to happen. Frodo need to find the Arkenforge. If it's, you know, okay, well, this fight has to happen because these people are not going to understand another language. They're not going to realize. But if so and so and so happens, you also get whatever it is that you were trying to obtain, and you don't need to fight. You know, if you can catch the wolves that are eating the shepherd's sheep and take them somewhere else where they don't harm anyone, then that's the adventure done as well. You don't need to kill the wolves, for instance.
Yeah, I can describe an encounter that I ran in a game that I was running just the other day. So there are these hadrosauruses around a pond, and the party's just moving by them, and they're kind of interested in these dinosaurs around this pond, but it's okay. It's just dinosaurs around a pond, whatever. But as they're moving past them, an Allosaurus jumps off the ridge and starts running toward the Hadrosaurs, and the Hadrosaurs start to run toward the party away from the Allosaur, right? So what do? And it was awesome because the players did all of these things to make the Hadrosaurs move in different directions, so they weren't going to come right toward them. And the Druid even went and cast Speak with Animals to talk to the Allosaurus and say, "I can give you food. Stop chasing these guys." And succeeded. Convinced the Allosaurus not to keep chasing. Even when another Allosaurus jumped off the same ridge because they were doing the two-pronged predator attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he managed to influence both Allosauruses not to keep chasing the Hadrosaurs. And they also made it so the Hadrosaurs didn't run them over. They did various things to change their direction and stuff like that. It was fun. And there was very, very little fighting in that encounter. And they got all the XP.
As it should be, they did well. Yeah. So I think if they somehow managed to make that a bit more within the game ethos, I think that would be a great addition to the game.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think somebody like Chris Perkins could definitely, he's re-engineering the Dungeon Master's Guide, he said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think an expert DM like Chris Perkins could definitely teach people things like that. Like, one of the things that Dungeons and Dragons doesn't do enough of right now is teach new DMs things like that. And that, so I agree with you, that would make D&D greater.
Well, we've been at it for over an hour. I've had a great deal of fun.
Me too.
Good. I'm glad. So we should be doing this again. Viewers, listeners, thank you very much indeed for being there. We'd love to hear what people have to say. Really, this is a sort of situation where hearing constructive comments would be super duper welcome. But
yep.
We should say goodnight for now. Humans, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.